There is a power within the human spirit that no handcuff can hold and no shackle can silence. There is a fire that lives in the soul of those who have been told to bow, told to bend, told to stay quiet. And when that soul rises and says, "No more," something begins to break in the unseen. It is not the loud defiance of the body that causes chains to fall, but the still, unshakable resolve of the Spirit that says, "I will not kneel to what is wrong." The greatest freedom does not begin with laws or policies. It begins with the decision to stand, even when standing costs everything. The chains that bind are not always made of iron. They are made of fear. They are made of silence. They are made of generations of voices being told to sit down, shut up, and behave. But no chain forged by human hands can last against a soul that remembers who it is. You can lock a body, but you cannot lock a voice that speaks truth. In the face of lies, you can attempt to bury a people, but if they rise in spirit, if they rise in faith, if they rise in love, then those chains will not hold. They may rattle, they may tighten, but they will not last. Because the soul was not made to kneel to injustice. The soul was not born to serve fear. It was not created to lower itself to lies, to cruelty, to hate dressed in power. The soul was made to stand tall, not out of arrogance, but out of divine remembrance. And when a soul remembers, when it lifts its head, even when the weight of history is pressing it down, when it lifts its voice, even when the world tries to mute it, when it lifts its eyes to see what others are too afraid to look at, then chains begin to tremble. Not all prisons are built of stones. Some are made of silence, of people taught to accept the unacceptable, of communities raised to believe that worth must be earned, that dignity must be begged for. But when a single voice rises and says, "I am already enough," something shifts in the atmosphere. You don't have to break chains with your hands. When you break them with your identity, when you know who you are, no weight can hold you. When your soul refuses to kneel, the world must either change or get out of your way. There are those who will tell you that peace comes from silence, that if you stay in line, keep your head down, you'll find your place. But what they really mean is stay beneath, stay behind, stay beneath the foot of oppression, beneath the gaze of judgment, beneath the weight of systems that were never built for your freedom. But the soul knows better. The soul aches for truth. It burns for justice. It remembers the songs of freedom long before the body learns to speak. And when the soul awakens, it does not kneel. It sings, it marches, it loves, it speaks. It becomes a light so bright that no chain can dim it. Chains fall when the soul no longer accepts them. Not because the world agrees, because the world cannot compete with the fire of someone who has been awakened. You do not need permission to stand. You do not need approval to speak. You need only to remember that your breath is sacred, that your presence matters, that your voice carries the weight of every ancestor who refused to kneel. And when you stand, you do not stand alone. You stand with 1,000 unnamed voices behind you. You stand with history rising beside you. You stand with future generations, waiting for your courage to make their road a little clearer. This is not about rebellion for its own sake. This is about restoration, about lifting back up what has been trampled, about reclaiming the dignity that was never meant to be stolen. The soul doesn't rise in hate. It rises in holy defiance, a refusal to let darkness write the final word, a refusal to let fear become law, a refusal to let injustice become normal. It rises not to destroy, but to build, not to divide, but to deliver, not to burn down, but to light the path forward. And make no mistake, standing will cost you. Refusing to kneel will offend those who benefit from your silence. It will disturb those who only feel powerful when others feel small. But the soul does not stand for applause. It stands for truth. And truth is worth the price. Truth will stretch you. Truth will isolate you. But truth will also set you free. And in that freedom, chains begin to lose their grip. One link at a time, they fall. Not because the world let go, but because you refuse to hold on. Some chains are cultural. Some are internal. Some are built of voices that told you what you couldn't do, where you didn't belong, what you would never become. And if you carry those chains long enough, you start to believe them. You start to kneel in your mind long before your knees touch the ground. But when the soul wakes up, when it says, "This is not the truth of me," then even the chains inside begin to shatter. Because what's in you is stronger than what's around you. What's in you is greater than the history that tried to shape you. What's in you is deeper than the scars left behind. What's in you cannot be silenced. You are the voice they hoped would stay quiet. You are the dream they tried to bury. You are the fire they thought they could drown. But here you are, still breathing, still rising, still standing. And that in itself is a victory. That in itself is proof that the chains have lost their power. Because freedom isn't just in the march. It's in the mindset. It's not just in the breaking. It's in the becoming. When the soul refuses to kneel, it begins to reshape reality. It begins to reorder the world, because nothing threatens system like someone who knows they are already free. It may not be easy. It may not be quick. But every time you choose to speak, when silence is safer, you are loosening the chains. Every time you love in a world that teaches hate, you are snapping a link. Every time you show up with grace, with dignity, with fire in your eyes, and peace in your heart, you are making the prison weaker. You are rewriting the story. There are those who will call it rebellion. Let them. There are those who will say, you're stirring trouble. Let them speak, still have a dream. Because the greatest trouble the world has ever known came when one soul refused to kneel to lies, when one soul said, and that one soul, none, and that one soul became the echo that turned into a movement. You do not need to be many to break chains. You need only to believe. You need only to remember. You need only to rise. And if you rise, others will follow. If you speak, others will listen. If you walk forward, even with trembling steps, the ground will begin to open. The locks will begin to rust. The doors will begin to shake, because your soul was never meant to be caged. Your heart was never meant to be silenced. Your story was never meant to end in surrender. You were made to stand. You were made to rise. And when you do, the very chains that tried to hold you will become the testimony of your strength. They will lie broken behind you, not because the world gave you freedom, but because your soul demanded it. The pain you endured will become someone else's peace. The burden you carried will become someone else's blessing. And the strength you found in the storm will become the torch that lights another soul through their darkness. There is a power sleeping within every man and woman, a quiet fire buried beneath the noise of doubt, fear, and shame. And for a time, the world may succeed in keeping that power silent. It may whisper lies into ears that were made to hear truth. It may bury voices beneath years of rejection. It may chain hearts to the weight of their past. But the moment that soul begins to believe in itself, truly believe, not in what the world says, but in what was placed inside it from the beginning, then that soul becomes the most dangerous force in the world, because a soul awakened is a soul unstoppable, a soul that has walked through fire and come out standing, a soul that has tasted rock bottom and yet still chooses to rise, a soul that has been told, you can't, again and again, and yet still says, watch me. That is the kind of power no system can suppress. That is the kind of truth no lie can hide. You see, belief isn't just a feeling. It's a revolution. Belief is the soil where purpose takes root. It is the water that wakes up dry bones. It is the light that breaks the grip of darkness. When a soul believes, the chains fall, not always on the outside, but always on the inside. When a soul believes, fear begins to flee, not because the danger is gone, but because courage has risen to meet it. And it doesn't take fame. It doesn't take fortune. It doesn't take applause or approval. It takes one decision, one choice to stop shrinking, one moment to say, enough of the lies they told me. One act of faith to declare, I was born with purpose, and I'm going to live like it. That single spark can set a life on fire, and that fire can light the world. History does not remember the ones who never doubted. It remembers the ones who doubted and still walked forward. It remembers the ones who were told they were too small, too loud, too quiet, too broken, too different, and still dared to believe they were born to matter. It remembers the ones who stood when it would have been easier to sit, who spoke when silence would have been safe, who marched forward while the world screamed, turn back. This world knows how to keep people asleep. It knows how to feed them just enough comfort to quiet the questions, just enough distraction to numb the dreams. But the moment someone sees through the illusion, the moment someone wakes up and says, there is more to me than what they see, the foundations of everything that kept them bound begin to shake, because they realize that the prison wasn't locked from the outside. It was fear on the inside. And once fear loses its grip, freedom begins to walk tall. That kind of belief doesn't just set one person free. It ignites freedom in others. It becomes contagious. It becomes unstoppable. One soul that believes becomes a mirror, showing others what's possible. A voice that says, if I can rise, so can you. A light that breaks through the fog of someone else's despair. That's why The world tries so hard to stop people from believing. That's why it fights so violently to convince you that you are less than. Because the enemy doesn't fear your weakness. It fears your awakening. There is something dangerous about a man who's no longer afraid of failure. There is something powerful about a woman who refuses to play small. There is something world shaking about a human being who understands their divine worth, not because they were told so by the world, but because they heard it from within, because they looked at the ashes of their pain and saw purpose rising, because they felt the weight of their struggle and realized it had forged something unbreakable. This kind of belief cannot be bought. It cannot be faked. It is not loud or arrogant, but steady and undeniable. It doesn't scream, but it doesn't flinch. It doesn't need permission. It doesn't ask for applause. It simply moves, speaks, breathes, and lives like someone who knows the storm cannot stop the sunrise, like someone who understands that even in the silence, they are not alone, like someone who has seen what they are made of and will never forget it. And the world doesn't know what to do with that kind of power. It can't shut it up. It can't buy it out. It can't shame it back into silence, because that soul no longer bows to the fear of rejection. That soul no longer waits for approval. That soul no longer seeks comfort over calling. It rises not because it's easy, because it must. It speaks not to impress, but to inspire. It moves not for applause, but for impact. Every great movement began with one soul that believed. Every freedom we enjoy today was born from a heart that refused to settle for less. Every breakthrough was sparked by someone who dared to say, I don't have to stay where I was left. And you too are called to that kind of belief, not a belief that pretends there is no fear, but a belief that moves in spite of it, not a belief that denies the pain, but a belief that knows the pain has a purpose. When a soul believes in itself, it stops competing and starts creating. It stops conforming and starts transforming. It stops living in the shadows of others and begins to cast its own light. It no longer fears rejection because it no longer lives for validation. It walks with a quiet strength that cannot be taught and cannot be taken. You may not have been raised to believe in yourself. You may have been told you weren't enough, but somewhere along the way, something inside you survived. Somewhere deep within, there was a whisper that said, "This isn't the end of your story." And that whisper was the beginning of belief. That whisper was the start of something the world could never silence.